Hi and welcome. You are at the Lopsided Crafter Loom Knitting channel. And today we are going to do part 2 of our Peekaboo sock. Part 1 included the folded cuff and the shadow wrap heel. Part 2, you should have already done your foot and ready to start the toe. We are going to be doing a rounded toe. So let's get started. This particular toe, you do not decrease every round. The instructions for each size, whether it's you're doing a 56, 60, 64, or 72, the instructions are the same. You just have less or more repeats depending on what size you are doing. So, on our decrease rounds, we are going to be knitting the 2 stitches here. This is our beginning of round, and then we have a stitch marker on the peg next to it. And then we have our half loom marker and the stitch marker next to that. These 2 stitches on each side will be knitted, and it will create this little fun seam right here. The actual decreases will be done on each side of those pegs, whether you are doing a slip slip knit or a knit 2 together. So we are going to knit 2, and now we are going to decrease, and we are going to be doing a slip slip knit. And a good way to know which direction you should move your stitch: knit 2 togethers go in the direction you are knitting, and a slip slip knit goes in the opposite. So once I have knitted my first 2 stitches, my next decrease stitch is a slip slip knit. That means I'm going to take the stitch from peg 4 and I'm going to move it to peg 3. So I'm just going to pick that up and move that stitch over here to this peg. And now I am going to go ahead and get my other decreases ready. So we know that we're going to decrease next to our next set of 2 stitch markers, and this is going to be a knit 2 together. So I'm going to move the stitch from this peg to this peg. And sometimes it's easy to move it, sometimes you've got to finagle it. We have our 2 knits, and our next decrease will be a slip slip knit. So I'm going to move this stitch to this peg. And that split, so let me pick that up again. Move her over here. And then finally, our last stitch over here before our beginning of round marker, we have another 2 knit together that we're going to do right here. So I'm going to move this stitch in this direction. Now, we have emptied 4 pegs around the loom. So what we're going to do now is we are just going to be moving stitches back and forth until we create an empty link and we can take it off. It really doesn't matter where you start. You can start in the middle, you can start at the beginning, you can start at the end. It really doesn't matter. But you will be removing 2 links on every decrease round. So I am just going to start picking some stitches up and moving them. This part does take a little bit of time. once you have a few decrease rounds done, it does go a lot faster because you have, less stitches here in the middle that you've got to contend with. But the first couple decrease rounds, it takes a little bit longer. But just take your time. I will say, if you have a loom like this one from Cindy Wood Crafts, you would not have to move all your stitches, because then all you got to do is slide your slider pegs in to decrease. So if you wanted to do the same toe on this loom, that is possible. But because we have done it here on this flexi loom, we need to move our stitches. If you come to a point where some of your stitches are tight, you can move the loom to make it easier for you to move those stitches. Okay, so we're getting here close to the end. I have one here and I have one here. So what is going to be the best? The best is probably going to be, it doesn't matter. I can move this one and this one over here, or I can move these over here. But I think I am just going to keep going in the direction that I was working. So I'm going to move this last one over here. And now I have an empty link. I'm just going to take that out, pop it out, put it back together. And now we need to do the same thing over here on the other side. Okay, I've moved all of the stitches on this other side, so I'm going to take this link out. And now what I like to do, just to ensure that my stitches are not loosey-goosey, I will just take my loom hook and tighten these stitches down. The further you go around the round, the bigger this loop's going to get right here. So you'll continue to pull that slack out all the way around, and that will keep your stitches nice and even. So you won't have any loosey-goosey stitches there. And when you get to one that has a double, you'll have to determine which one to pull. Sometimes it's the top one and sometimes it's the bottom one. So pull that one and then pull the next stitch that is on that same peg. Just keep going all the way around. Okay, once you have done that, we are going to work on rounds 2 and 4, which are just a plain knit round. So knit rounds 2 through 4, and we will be back for round 5. Okay, we are getting ready to start round 5 of our heel, which is another decrease round. And it is exactly as round 1. We're just repeating it. So we're going to knit our first 2 stitches. Our next stitch is a slip slip knit. Remember, it goes in the opposite direction than you are working. So you're going to take the peg next to where you want your stitch. You're going to take that stitch off and you are going to move it to the peg where you want your stitch. And that creates your empty peg. Okay. Future editing, Erica here. In this next clip, I'm actually showing you how to move the stitches as you work instead of moving them like I did for round 1. Either way you want to do it is fine. Find which way works best for you. Now back to the video. So now we are going to knit those 2 stitches off. Remember, you can do it one at a time or both of them together. Sometimes it's easier to do one at a time. Now, from here, we are going to knit and move our stitches all the way over to here. And I'm going to go ahead and get our knit 2 together ready by taking the peg off of the stitch next to where we want our knit 2 together and moving it to that peg. Now, somewhere here in the middle is where we're going to have to remove a link. And you can determine where you want to do that very, very easily. So let me show you. So we're just going to go behind this next peg. We're just going to pretend like it's nothing is there, that it's not even a peg until we work our stitch. Then we're going to move it over there. And we're going to do the same thing all the way across. Just knit and move, knit, and move. It doesn't change the stitch any by doing it that way, as long as you don't pull tight. Once you put it over here, if you pull your working yarn really, really tight, you're going to change the direction of the knit. So just let it fall normally and pull your tension like you normally would. All right, so we've done a few of those. Let's do a few more so that we have our empty link here in the middle somewhere. All right, I'm just going to come back over here to this other side, and I am going to move these stitches. And the reason why I'm doing this is so that it helps with the tension. These on this side are much tighter than these over here because we've worked and moved back. So this kind of helps redistribute the tension all the way across. Let me zoom back out a little bit so you guys can see what I'm doing a little bit better. Hopefully, I'm just moving those stitches one peg over to create that empty link that we need to remove. So we have one left, but we have one empty peg on both sides. Well, we can tell that this peg right here is part of this link. So we're going to go ahead and move this peg over here. Like so. And now we have an empty link that we can remove. And we're right here where we finished knitting. Don't forget to remove the slack from each of your stitches before you continue knitting in the round. And from there you knit back over here to your knit 2 together, and you'll be done with the first half of the decrease. Okay, so we are back here at our knit 2 together, and we are just going to hopefully knit those off. It is definitely a little tight. There we go. And now we're back to our markers, and we're just going to repeat what we just did. So we are going to knit 2, slip, slip, knit, knit to the last 2 pegs, knit 2 together, and then we're at the end of our round. Our first stitch here is our slip slip knit, and that is a little tight, so I am going to go ahead and knit those loops off one at a time, just so I don't break my pegs. I mean, they are pretty darn flexible, but and reasonably inexpensive, but I don't want to break one. So now we're just going to knit and move those as we go until we get to a point where we want to stop and move our stitches. I mean, you can actually knit all the way across if you want to, and I will show you what we do on the other side. We'll see if sometimes the links will link up and sometimes they won't. Yeah, so it's not going to link up here. So I'll show you what to do if we when we get closer to this side. So go ahead and knit and I'll meet you back. Okay, so we're back over here. We have our knit 2 together and we've got an empty peg on either side. Again, I'm just going to move these over here. Sometimes you may find that you need to temporarily park a stitch. And what I mean by that is, let's say that we're going to remove this link right here. Okay. So what I mean by temporarily park a stitch is use the last stitch that you just made and just park it over there. Remove that link and then put the stitch back where it goes. So let's say that these are our empty ones. I'm going to go ahead and move these over here so you can see what I'm talking about. So our original stitch was right here. Our original last stitch. So what that did was it created an empty peg here and here. But we want this link to be empty. So you can either move that last stitch over here, or you can move it over here. For right now, I am just going to park it right here. And I'm going to remove this link, and then I'm going to move it over here. This is just another scenario. If you come across, you know, this type of situation, that way you don't have to move pegs back and forth. You can just borrow the peg next to it. Now I'm going to take that loop and put it on that peg and tighten it down. And from there, we just knit the rest of our round. So we're knitting 2 here. And then this is our knit 2 together. And those, like I said, those knit 2 togethers and those slip slip knits, always a little bit tighter. And that one's a little too tight to work together, especially through a camera lens. So I'm just going to knit those 2 off one at a time. If I wasn't looking through the camera, it probably wouldn't be so hard to knit that off. But there you go. Now you have decreased 4 more stitches. Moving on to round 6 and 7, we are going to knit. 8 and 9, we are going, or excuse me, 8, we are going to decrease again. 9, we're going to decrease. And then after 9, we're going to decrease every round until we have a set amount of stitches because I am doing a 60 peg sock. I will knit until I have 20 pegs left. It's going to be 10 on each side. And what I mean by side is there's going to be 8 and then 9, 10. 8 and 9, 10. So we will have 20 for the 60 peg loom. For a 56 peg loom, you will have 16. For a 64 peg loom, you will have 24. And for a 72 peg loom, you will have 32. And once we do that, we are going to Kitchener it close. So go ahead and do the remaining parts of your toe. 6 and 7 are knit. 8 is repeat 1. 9 is knit. And everything after 9 is a repeat of 1 until you have those stitches remaining. Okay, all 9 rounds, initial rounds of the toe have been done. So from here, I am just going to be decreasing every round like we've done in the past until we get to a set number of stitches. Once we get to that set number of stitches, we will put the stitches onto stitch markers, take them off the loom, put them on a set of, you can either use double point or magic loop knitting needles, and then we are going to Kitchener it closed. So from here, repeat round 1. You're going to be slip, slip, knit after your first 2 stitches. And your knit 2 together is always before your 2 marked stitches. So knit 2 together, marked stitches, slip, slip, knit. Knit 2 together, 2 marked stitches, slip, slip, knit. Continue doing that in the round until you have a total of 16 pegs left for the 56 peg loom, 20 pegs left for the 60 peg loom, 24 pegs for a 64 peg loom, and 32 for a 72 peg loom. And then once you've done that, I will show you how to move them to the needles and Kitchener it closed. Okay, I have decreased down until I have 8 stitches in between the 2 marked pegs. So what that means is I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2 stitch markers, 8, and 2 stitch markers for a total of 20 stitches. So in order to keep this even when we take it off of the loom, I am going to put pegs 2 through 11 with one color, and then 12 through 20 plus 1 another color. I have my stitch markers already here, and we are going to first wrap the loom with your working yarn about 3 times. And I'm going to do a little more just for good measure. We want to make sure that we have plenty of yarn when we do the Kitchener closing. Snip that off so that it is easy to differentiate your front side of the loom versus the back side of the loom. I do suggest that you use 2 different colored stitch markers because we're going to be putting them on our knitting needles to do the closing. You can use DPNs, you can use a circular needle like I've got. Does not matter. So when we put our stitch markers on, we just want to make sure that we're not splitting the yarn. See how I split it right there? We want to make sure that we get every bit of that yarn inside of that stitch marker. So if you pull it, you can see that you, whether or not you have split your stitch. This does take a little bit of time, but I don't feel that it really takes any more time than if you were doing the closing of the Kitchener cast on. So pick which evil you want to deal with, the closing or the beginning. But it does give you the option to do a different type of sock if you were wanting to do toe up or cuff down. You know, it gives you the extra option. So yeah, that one got stuck with the other one. So you can take them off as you go if you want to. It really doesn't matter. I always seem to just tend to leave it on. Go ahead, pick up those stitches and make sure that your back side is your other color, and we will be right back. I did forget to mention that before you put your last stitch marker in, go ahead and knit that off so that way your yarn is in the correct spot for the Kitchener cast off. I know we're adding an additional stitch there, but it's not going to matter. We just want our yarn in the right spot. Then you can put that final stitch marker in. Once you have your stitch markers on your stitches, you can just pop them off of each peg all the way around, and we will be done with the loom. And then all we need to do is close the top of our toe, and we will have a new sock. How exciting. I love knitting socks, whether it's needle knitting or loom knitting. I think I said earlier in this video, or it might have been one of my other tutorials this week, socks used to intimidate me, and they seem to intimidate a lot of people. I think it's just because of the smaller yarn and the smaller stitches and things like that. But I fall into the camp of most people that once you knit a couple pairs of socks, you love them, and that's really all you want to do. Okay, so our little loom, our little baby loom, that was what was left. And now we are going to put these stitches onto our knitting needle over here, so that way we can close up. So you want your yarn, your working yarn, to be on your back needle, okay? So set it up to where your working yarn is coming from the back, and then you have these stitches here and these stitches there. Well, in order to get the working yarn in the correct direction, we are going to have to put the stitches on from this way. So that way the tips of our needles are over here. So you just take that needle, find your first stitch of the color that you used on this side, and you just put your needle right through that stitch. I personally do not take the stitch markers off until I have all of them on the needles, just in case I have to take it back off for some reason. I don't want to lose a stitch. But if you just pick that stitch marker up, you can feed it right on to that needle. Really, really easy. Just take your time. Make sure that you don't twist your stitch. Make sure that you put them on in order. I know it's a little fidgety, but again, it's one of those processes that's worth it in the end. All right, I'm going to finish doing the rest of this off camera, this side, and then I'll show you what to do on the next side. Okay, so we have all of our front stitches on our front needle. Now we are going to take the other half of this needle, and excuse me, this is a 60-inch knitting needle, a US #1. That was the only one that I could find that was empty. So now we're going to feed it through this way so that the tips of our needles are the same. But in order to do that, I'm going to turn it around. So now we'll be working this way. Okay? So you just do the same thing. You find that first blue or whatever color you're using and slide that stitch right on. Again, you want to make sure that you are not twisting your stitches. Make sure that those stitch markers come around to the front here. Grab our next empty one, put it on, and so forth, all the way across. Once you finish that, you should have something that looks like this. So that now when we turn our needles around and face the opposite direction, our working yarn is right here in the back where we need it to be. So from here, now I am satisfied that all my stitches are on there and are on there correctly. So now I will just remove all of these stitch markers before I do the actual closing. So go ahead, remove all of your stitch markers, and we will be right back. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is our setup stitches. We are going to go through our first stitch here as if to purl, and we're going to leave that on. Then we're going to go back here to our back needle as if to knit and leave that on. Now we are going to go back to our front. We are going to go through this one as if to knit. And we are going to take that off, being careful only to take one stitch at a time off. And now we are going to purl through the front so that we will have that stitch ready when we come back. Now we're going to go to the back and we are going to purl that first stitch. Pull your yarn a little tight. Like, don't strangle it, but tight. And now we are going to take just that one loop off. And now we are going to go through this back stitch as if to knit. And we are going to leave it on. We're going to go to the front, knit, take it off, purl, leave it on. Purl, take it off, just that one stitch, knit, and leave it on. Going back to the front, knit, take it off, purl, leave it on. And you do this all the way across to the last stitch, the last two stitches. Okay, when you have two stitches left, you knit through the front and purl through the back. And just slide your needles out. Now, you will have a little bit of a dog ear here on each side. So when you put your yarn needle through the sock to leave your ends in, you can correct it. The one here on this side isn't as bad as, you can see this one sticking up. But once you feed your yarn in, you are done. And then weave in all your ends. And you will have a completed sock. A completed pair of socks. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. And I hope you guys are enjoying Socktober 2025. Until next time, stay happy, stay cozy, and may all your socks find their matches. Bye.